Good afternoon. It's Wednesday, the 7th of May, 2025, just after 1 o'clock. Welcome to UK Column News. I'm your host, Mike Robinson. Joining me in the studio today is Charles Malet. Welcome to the programme, Charles.
Thank you, Mike.
And by video link, we have Vanessa, Beeley and Sandi Adams. Now, later in the programme, we're going to be covering Israeli cyber attacks on Western nations, the latest David Attenborough caper and Middle East and WorldCoin. But we're going to begin with Iran terror on British streets. Or is it, Charles?
That is a very, very good question. If we were to pay attention only to the BBC, I think we'd come away with one singular point of view. Now, coincident with the preparations for the VE Day commemorations this week, police and security services are reported to have foiled a number of so-called terror plots, and the only nation which has been connected with any of this is Iran, in that all the suspects have almost all been described as Iranian. Dan Jarvis, the security minister and a former officer in the parachute regiment, has wasted no time in describing the mortal peril from which we have all been saved, apparently. He stepped off on the wrong foot in saying that the first duty of government is national security, and whilst this may fit with his job description, it does clang with the Code of Hammurabi of 1772 BC, which I've mentioned before, which puts it that the first duty of government is, in fact, to protect the powerless from the powerful, which is a very different thing. Nonetheless, the point Jarvis wanted to make was not just that we are facing some sort of enhanced state threat, a claim certainly not reinforced by the national threat level, which remains at substantial, but that by and large Iran is responsible. He also points towards early intervention by counter-terror police achieved by counter-state threats powers, as he describes them. And it shouldn't be forgotten that it was he that introduced the foreign interference registration scheme, which he imagines will be adhered to by those that really do have malevolent intent towards the UK. Now, he cited the chief of MI5, Ken McCallum, in saying that in the last year, the number of state threat investigations run by MI5 jumped up by 48%, and went on to say that this statistic is a stark indication of the increased threat. But of course, it's nothing of the sort. Unless he can demonstrate that there has been a correlation in findings, then it's merely a statistic, and more, it reflects the pressure applied in order to find the so-called state threat. This is extremely reminiscent of the lead up to the unlawful intervention in Iraq in 2003. And on that note, the propaganda machine is warming up. The BBC here with a documentary about how dreadful Iran is, seeding in the minds of the young that we should be ready for war with her. Readiness, though, is not something which springs to mind when considering the much publicised operational deployment of the Prince of Wales Carrier Strike Group. Their Twitter feed reads more like that of a hen party, here bragging that they have made it to the Med, as though that should be considered an achievement for a naval operation. The Times of India here showing a reel of the defensive and offensive capabilities of Iran, and indeed the rhetoric coming from that country, all of which coincides with the launch of yet another attempt to harvest biometric data from British veterans, here the Valor programme, which is to offer further support just so long as the participant engages on a digital basis. And finally, something that Brian referred to on Monday, it should be considered no coincidence that the VE Day commemorations have been used as an exercise in recruitment and, indeed, revisionism. The parade, which stepped off on Monday, shown here in Parliament Square, included a detachment of Ukrainians. The triple inferences here are supposed to be that we could not have won the war without them, that Russia had nothing to do with the Second World War, and that we are, due to the current and so-called illegal aggression of Russia, in the same predicament again. So it's time to join up and grab your kit. Of the illegal aggression of Israel, though, we must not speak, something which Dan Jarvis attempted to ensure by concluding in his address to the Commons that it is no secret that there is a long-standing pattern of the Iranian intelligence services targeting Jewish and Israeli people internationally. So although the basis of this story seems to be in an attempt by security services to, put it that Iranians have indeed been plotting against the British state, there seem to be many other things that will fall into place as a result of this. I don't know what your thoughts are on this, Mike.
Well, I'm interested to get Vanessa's thoughts on this. We were talking about it earlier, and her immediate reaction to me then was exactly what my reaction had been before I was speaking to her, that this is not only reminiscent of Iraq 2003 and the run-up to, but also, allegations of Novichok and Skripal and this kind of thing, Vanessa.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, this is a very poorly put together false flag attempt, in my opinion. And it's worth pointing out, as many people did on social media, why would they bother coming to the UK to attack a synagogue when actually the largest population of Jews is in Iran after the occupied territories of Palestine, of course. So, I mean, sorry, I shouldn't really mock the whole idea, but it is comedic in many ways.
Indeed. Well, look, let's move on to Israel then and what they're up to with Yemen.
Yes, so it all began. Of course, it all began back on the 7th of October, and it began, again, the war against Yemen began, if people don't remember, back in March 2015, a totally illegal aggression by Saudi Arabia after even the UN peace envoy to Yemen had stated that there was no need for aggression. Yemen had politically resolved its issues. So a few days ago, Yemen targeted Ben Gurion Airport in Israel, bypassing effectively 4 layers of air defense, starting in Saudi Arabia and then with the American THAAD system and the various Israeli air defense systems to create a crater of 25 meters in depth. This, of course, caused the shutdown of Ben Gurion Airport and the threat by Yemen to impose an air blockade combined with their naval blockade in the Red Sea. So Israel and the US carried out combined strikes against Sana'a, the capital city of Yemen. And if we roll the video, I'll just talk through it. So US bombed Sana'a, the capital city, while Israel bombed the Yemeni Sana'a main airport, targeting civilian aircraft, the runways, the arrival and departure terminals, killing 4 people and injuring 39, claiming that they disabled the airport fully. Of course, that claim has been made quite a few times, 2015. But what we must remember is that the US and Israel have admitted themselves that they have absolutely no on-the-ground intelligence in Yemen, unlike within their neighboring countries in the region, like Syria and Lebanon, for example. And this is Mohammed al-Shami, a Yemeni commentator on X, who went on saying that it's reported that they bombed Sana'a airport terminal, service facilities at the airport, as well as civilian aircraft, as I said, and the Amran cement factory. And then let's have a look. This was a bit of a surprise announcement by President Trump in the last 24 hours. So let's play his announcement.
We had some very good news last night. The Houthis have announced that they are not, or they've announced to us at least, that they don't want to fight anymore. They just don't want to fight. And we will honor that. And we will stop the bombings. And they have capitulated. But more importantly, we will take their word. They say they will not be blowing up ships anymore. And I will accept their word. And we are going to stop the bombing of the Houthis, effective immediately.
Now, I would suggest, and I'd be interested in other people's opinions, but the hubris that Trump was displaying there does suggest that the Yemenis did not capitulate, and I'll come on to explain why in a minute. But what was particularly interesting is that Israel was issuing, or various authorities in Israel were issuing statements saying that they were shocked at the US Houthi ceasefire, claiming that Trump had given them absolutely no heads up. And if we look at one commentator on X, who says basically, as he explained 1 month ago, the Houthis, or Ansarullah as they should be known, only started attacking US ships after Trump started bombing Yemen to retaliate on Israel's behalf. So the actual ceasefire, although it's good news, but it simply takes us back to March 2025 as regards conditions, because Israel is not included in this ceasefire, and that's a very important point to make here. And then shortly after this, Trump made, in inverted commas, a big announcement. So let's have a listen, or rather, he promised a big announcement. Let's listen to this statement to the press.
And we'll have maybe before we're going to, as you know, the Middle East, Saudi Arabia. We're going to UAE and Qatar, and that'll be, I guess, Monday night. Some of you are coming with us. I think before then we're going to have a very, very big announcement to make, like as big as it gets, and I won't tell you on what, but it's going to, and it's very positive. I'd tell you if it was negative or positive. I can't keep that up. It is really, really positive. And that announcement will be made either Thursday or Friday or Monday before we leave. But it'll be one of the most important announcements that have been made in many years about a certain subject, very important subject. So you'll all be here.
Apparently, the Washington Post released today that the big announcement is that the Persian Gulf, which has been known as such since the 16th century, is about to be renamed the Arabian Gulf. So not only do we now have the Gulf of America as opposed to the Gulf of Mexico, we have another name change by Trump. This is according to certain officials within the US administration, yet to be confirmed. And I'm sure that the 3-day ceasefire had nothing to do with the fact that Trump is going to the Gulf countries, which would be number one on the target list from Yemen. And also, of course, that bombing any of those countries would seriously impact on the US economy, as it could potentially destroy the oil sector in those Gulf areas. So, but I'm sure that has nothing to do with it. I'm sure it's because the Yemenis wanted to capitulate. And then let's have a look at how well the US has actually been doing against Yemen. So titles yesterday in CNN, second US Navy jet is lost at sea from the Truman aircraft carrier. This one apparently was due to a failed arrestment. The pilots basically bailed out before the disaster happened, and the jet ended up at the bottom of the Red Sea. Of course, this isn't the first time. There was another jet, jet overboard, lost a 60 million jet at sea. This was in April. And actually, there was a third one, which people may not remember, back in December last year. This was reported in Aviation. In December, another FA-18F Super Hornet was shot down by US Navy cruiser USS Gettysburg in a friendly fire incident. So the US is not exactly performing terribly well against Yemen. It's certainly done nothing to prevent the targeting of the US aircraft carriers in the Red Sea. And then let's have a quick add up of the damage since the Al-Aqsa flood operations on the 7th of October. So 3 Hornets, 67 million each. So that's 201 million, 22 MQ-9s since the 7th of October, 4 MQ-9s, which are the drones, of course, before October the 7th. So the total so far is $1.03 billion US. And on social media, a few people went to town with images of how well the US is doing as regards the loss, in inverted commas, of aircraft. On the left was a Yemeni joke. On the right was a Russian joke. I'm sure that has nothing to do with conditions elsewhere also. And of course, this, on a more serious level, this was a warning from the New York Times about 2 months ago. US commanders worry that the Yemen campaign will drain arms needed to deter China. So potentially another reason, of course, that Trump is looking for the US to pull out of any aggression against Yemen. And then let's have a look at Yemen's response, remembering, of course, that Israel is not included in the ceasefire. So the Humanitarian Coordination Center in Sana'a, Yemen, has officially notified the ICAO and the IATA, their airline associations, of the Yemeni armed forces' decision to impose an indefinite air traffic ban on Israel, which again will have huge ramifications for Israeli trade and economy. And then finally, this was a statement put out by the president of the Salvation Government in Yemen, President Mahdi al-Mashat, Supreme Political Council in Yemen. There will be no retreat from supporting Gaza, no matter the cost. What happened proves that our strikes are effective and will continue. No aggression will deter us from our just decision to support Gaza until the Zionist aggression and siege on Gaza are halted. So Yemen has absolutely no intention of stopping its attempt to prevent genocide and punish the Zionist entity for committing genocide against Palestinians.
Thank you, Vanessa. Well, let's move on from there to, let's consider this. Russia and China carry out all the nasty spyware attacks on UK, US, and the European Union. That's right, isn't it? That's what we're told. Well, no, as we've been highlighting here at the UK column, and Vanessa as well, for several years now, it's Israel which is the biggest threat to our personal privacy and our so-called democracies, because Israel has their own equivalent of GCHQ and the NSA, and it's called Unit 8200. So Unit 8200, the Israeli Defense Forces Signals Intelligence Unit, is not just a signals intelligence unit. It's also a cyber warfare operation, having run a number of operations, for example, the Stuxnet virus, which disabled the nuclear centrifuges in Iran, Operation Orchard, which was from 2007, in which Unit 8200 most probably jammed Syrian radar systems without alerting air defense operators in order to allow for a precise airstrike against Syrian nuclear facility at Deir ez-Zor, the Ogero incident, in which the Lebanese government blamed Israel for having launched a sophisticated cyber attack on Lebanon's telecommunications company Ogero, to spread disinformation through audio messages to over 10,000 Lebanese citizens. Now, those could be argued to be military applications, but we have to remember that Unit 8200 also seed funds tech companies, including, this one, Checkpoint, and also Palo Alto Networks, many others. I just am choosing these two as an example for a number of reasons. But if we look at Checkpoint first and remind ourselves that Gil Shved is the co-founder and chief executive of Checkpoint. He's Israel's 8th richest billionaire, reportedly worth $4.7 billion. And of course, there is Dr. Dora Dor, who's chief technology officer at Checkpoint, is also responsible for Checkpoint's rocket initiatives, former chief product officer. And both of these people were former Unit 8200, Unit 8200 seed funding this company, and so on. Now, in 2016, Checkpoint teamed up with Israeli arms company Israel Aerospace Industries to form a consortium called IC3, and that was established by the Israeli government's Ministry of Economy, and it was set up to, quote, address technological cyber needs at a national and governmental level, and IC3 offers end-to-end solutions for national cyber systems. Now, coming back to Checkpoint and their activities, they are everywhere. They are providing firewalls for just about for many, many corporations around the world. They're in local councils. They're in the NHS. They're everywhere. And so I'm going to ask the question, can anybody think of a better source for bulk data collection than a company selling appliances which process every single packet of information as it passes between corporate government networks and the internet and so on? Now, to be clear, I have no direct evidence that Checkpoint is doing this, but I am asking the question, and I think it's a question that needs to be answered. And the same question, in fact, that some, including the likes of Edward Lucas and many others who are pushing a pro-Israeli and an anti-Russian narrative, and particularly an anti-Chinese narrative, have been asking about Huawei. And so the other question I have is, if Huawei is viewed as a threat to national security, then why not Checkpoint? So why am I talking about this now? Well, another Unit 8200 spawned company is this one. This is the NSO group. NSO creates technology that helps government agencies prevent and investigate terrorism and crime to save thousands of lives around the globe. Well, that sounds wonderful. But of course, they don't just work with governments, as we'll come on to in a second. Now, in June 2023, Vanessa reported on this program that NSO Group's Pegasus software had been used to hack the phones of journalists in France, including a senior member of staff at France 24. And the fact that that hack had happened was made public by a French non-profit media organization called Forbidden Stories, who were working with Amnesty International, and they had obtained a list of 50,000 telephone numbers that had been compromised by clients of NSO Group who had bought access to the Pegasus software. Now, the hack itself worked by exploiting a vulnerability in WhatsApp, which meant that the spyware could be installed on the target phone by simply making a phone call to that phone. The phone call didn't even need to be answered by the person who was being attacked by this. Now, yesterday, then, a jury in the US court has decided that enough is enough, and they have fined NSO Group $167 million in punitive damages. The jury also awarded WhatsApp $444 million in compensation, which is in a sense pretty disgusting, since all of that money will go to Meta and none of it will go to the people who are receiving or on the receiving end of the hacks. Now, WhatsApp said today's verdict in WhatsApp's case is an important step forward for privacy and security as the first victory against the development and use of illegal spyware and that threatens the safety and privacy of everyone. Today's jury decision forces NSO, a notorious foreign spyware merchant, to pay damages as a critical deterrent to this malicious industry against their illegal acts aimed at American companies and the privacy and security of the people we serve. So it's quite interesting that they don't mention Israel directly in that press release. They just call them as a foreign spyware company. Now, the first step, in fact, perhaps would have been not to leave the security hole in WhatsApp in the first place. But in fairness to WhatsApp and Meta, they did act quickly when the vulnerability was eventually discovered. They rolled out a software update and they patched the vulnerability. They notified target users that their devices had been hacked. And then in the following weeks, Facebook and WhatsApp also removed NSO employees from their platforms. Now, it should be pointed out that NSO Group wasn't exactly discerning about who they sold access to the software to. Customers, in fact, included governments, but also criminal cartels, which is, as The Guardian reports here, resulted in the death of at least one journalist in Mexico. So, I think this is a big story. The fact that NSO Group has been sanctioned in this way, it could go even further. It could be argued that NSO Group's activities, the fact that they're selling Pegasus, or they had been selling Pegasus to not only governments, but also criminals, certainly leaves them open to much broader sanctions, if it had been anything other than an Israeli company. So, Vanessa, bearing in mind that NSO Group is supported by the Israeli government and their software has been deployed against civilians in the West, you would think, as I say, that a stronger response would have been coming. I just would like to get your thoughts on why governments are silent on this, why Meta's silent on the fact that it's an Israeli company, and are governments silent on this because they were customers of NSO Group? I just find it incredible that there's nothing, really, no broad coverage of this at all.
Well, again, I think we have to ask the question, who are our governments working for and whose national security are they protecting? It becomes clear that they're not protecting British citizens' national security because they're allowing what is now a state conducting a genocide and has been for 100 years to store our DNA, to collect data on us, to surveil us, to collaborate on projects within the national health sector in the UK and in the EU and in the US. So to what degree are we looking at state capture here? And why has our government, not only the current one, but preceding ones, why have they allowed such state capture to such an extent? This is what people should be extremely worried about, because I would guarantee it would be interesting to do a survey on how many 200 companies are now involved in UK sectors across the country.
Yes, it is incredible. I mean, the China comment, the Huawei comment is a valid question. Why are we so worried about Huawei and China, and we don't care, apparently? about Israel? Is this because of the sixth eye?
Yeah, I mean, I think for a raft of reasons, but we seem to live in an age, we've discussed it many times, where no criticism of Israel, either direct or indirect, is to be tolerated. I think that's part of it. I think also in terms of the sanctioning, it'd be interesting to see what does happen, bearing in mind how we've looked at the pharmaceutical industry for years and years and years, and every single time there's a knockback, it makes absolutely no difference, either in the confidence that people have to take their products or the eagerness with which governments will entangle themselves with them. So I don't know whether this will make much of a difference in the bigger picture. We'll see.
Okay, thank you. Sandi, let's welcome you to the programme. And, let's find out what the wonderful David Attenborough has been up to.
Thank you, Mike. Yes, well, it's Britain's National Treasure's 99th birthday tomorrow on March the 8th. And he's to celebrate this, he's launching his new film at the Royal Festival Hall in London, and it's called Ocean, with David Attenborough. Now, he's actively involved school children in the launch of this latest documentary. On May the 6th, a special Future Generations premiere was held at London Royal Festival Hall, where hundreds of children from UK schools were invited to attend. And each selected school received 15 free tickets, allowing students and staff to experience the film before its general release tomorrow. The film is very alarmist, and to be fair, it's likely to cause quite a lot of climate anxiety in these young students, if you ask me. And it's the way he uses the propaganda to really push the UN and the WEF Sustainable Goals agenda, and always has done. The documentary was funded through a collaboration of several organisations committed to environmental conservation and impactful storytelling. And I think storytelling is probably the apt word. The primary production companies behind the film are Silverback Films and Open Planet Studios. Major financial support came from Minderoo Pictures, the film division of the Australian philanthropic Minderoo Foundation, which contributed 1.5 million towards the 3.8 million production. That was the production budget, was 3.8 million. Other contributors were National Geographic, All Three Media International, 10% for the Ocean, that's the Sean Connery Foundation, Don Quixote Foundation, the Prince Albert II of Monaco Foundation. They're all coming out here, aren't they? National Geographic Society and Pristine Seas, and Revive Our Ocean. Now, Attenborough has for a long time been involved with the IMF and the World Bank. And in 2019, he did meet Christine Lagarde from the IMF, managing director. She invited him to speak at the IMF World Bank spring meetings in front of an audience of finance ministers and governors of central banks and executive directors. He also met the World Bank Christina Georgieva, and she invited him to the Our Planet presentation. Now, he's always got the banks involved in all of this, and because we know that all of this is really involved in the whole green economy and what they're now calling the blue economy. So the release of this Ocean with David Attenborough is strategically timed ahead of the World Ocean Day, which is a big conference being held in June in Nice by the United Nations, and it is focusing pretty much on Goal 14 of the Sustainable Goals, which is life under the sea. And again, it's all about the ocean floor, how it can be monetized, the minerals, everything. It's all about raping the sea. And we've got a picture of Christine Lagarde there with Attenborough. Now, he's always been involved in all of this, and from the very beginning, his film in 2023, Saving Our Wild Isles film, headed up something called the People's Plan for Nature, which really was instrumental in the can bill, and the blue economy is another way of them monetizing the ocean floor. And of course, Prince Charles is involved in all of this. He owns loads of seabed around the UK, and he's supported. He'll be there, I would imagine, tomorrow at the festival hall to celebrate him. There'll be a media frenzy around all of this, I'm absolutely sure. And we know that he's also been involved in the WWF, which was always historically about land grab, the Rhodes Foundation, and the Duke of Edinburgh and Prince Philip was one of the patrons. So yes, that's it. That's what's happening there. And I'll be talking about more things a little bit later on how this People Plans for Nature has impacted on the can bill. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Sandi. Thank you. Okay, let's move on. If you like what the UK Column does, please consider supporting us at support.ukcolumn.org. There are various ways to help us out there. You can make a donation or you could join as a member. And if you do join as a member, you get access to UK Column News Extra, the forums and so on. You can pick something up at the UK Column shop. And if you do buy something from Clive to Carl using the link on this page, then we do get a small commission for that, although it doesn't cost you anything extra. But if you can't do any of that, that's fine. But please do share as much material from the UK Column website as you can, because that helps us greatly. Now, the Cheltenham t-shirt still available?
Still available, still very comfortable, really cuts a dash wherever you go with it. And the live stream itself is still up on the website. So if you haven't yet watched the day in Cheltenham, please go and have a look.
Okay, thank you. Now, yesterday's interview is up on the website now. That was with Malcolm Hills, who is living in St. Petersburg in Russia. And, he is a UK Column member. I had a chat with him about his life there, the attitudes of Russian people to what's going on in the UK and Ukraine and in the world and so on. So do have a look at that if you possibly can. Tonight, Germ Warfare is speaking to Tim Noakes, who's exposing the lies about diet, sugar and science and so on, and why everything we've been told about health is probably wrong. So join us 7 p.m. for that on the usual live stream channels, if you can. Tomorrow at 1 p.m, then Ben is interviewing Braden Sorbo. Now, Charles last week spoke to Sam Sorbo, Braden's mother, about building resistance through home education. And Braden is speaking to Ben tomorrow about his work as an actor and author, a cultural commentator, and being part of what he describes as a new generation of young conservative voices emerging from the United States. So join at 1 p.m. for that tomorrow. A reminder of Stand in the Light, which is taking place May the 23rd to the 26th at Kilgarran in Cumbria. And Darren from the Light newspaper will be joining us extra for a few minutes to talk about the Stand in the Light Festival. So stick around for extra for that. A reminder of Sounds Beautiful Festival, which is taking place June the 26th to the 29th in Wimborne and Dorset. And lots to see and do there as well. And if you do, or if you'd like to win a couple of free tickets to that, there's a Facebook giveaway on the UK Columns Facebook channel page. You'll find the link in the show notes. And so there'll be 2 free tickets for the Sounds Beautiful Festival available there if you'd like to go and have a look after the programme. Okay, moving on then to the EU and Brexit. And well, today and tomorrow, the wonderful Secretary of State for Foreign Affairs, I get this wrong. Let's start again. Starting tomorrow, because we'll talk about our wonderful Secretary of State for Foreign Affairs in a second, but starting tomorrow is the informal meeting of foreign ministers in Warsaw in Poland, and that's going to be headed up by the Minister of Foreign Affairs, Radosław Sikorski, together with the High Representative of the European Union, Kaja Kallas, they're organising this informal meeting of EU foreign ministers in what's known as the Gymnich format, if I pronounced that correctly. Now, the meetings of this kind have been held since 1974, and their purpose, according to the EU, is to have an informal and open discussion among ministers on strategic issues. So let's come on to our wonderful Secretary of State, because, of course, he is going to be there. Now, he, of course, is talking about it. There's somebody else that isn't talking about it, but this is David Lammy. He's going to be there. The person who isn't talking about it, of course, is Nigel Farage, who seems to be absolutely silent on the issue. But Lamy had this to say: we're working hand in hand with our European allies to build a safer, more secure and more prosperous Europe. Fantastic. So he's going there to underline how closer cooperation on security and defence is in the interest of both the UK and the European Union. And he's going to discuss uniting across the continent to secure a just and lasting peace in Ukraine. He was the first Foreign Secretary since Brexit to attend any formal meeting of EU foreign ministers. That was last October. And he's been working hard to build these stronger ties with Europe since he became Foreign Secretary. So now as part of his visit, he is going to be following that by heading over to Bosnia and Herzegovina, where he's going to visit EU4 military headquarters. And that is significant because that's where EU troops first wore the EU flag on their arms, as we can see on screen here. It's also where the Union flag was flown beneath the EU flag, as we can see here. And it's also where EU troops were given EU4 medals a few years back. So, it is a fairly significant thing. I don't know what your thoughts are on this, Charles, but it just is incredible to me that we are going to have a major summit later this month with Ursula von der Leyen and the European Commission with a view to, as the BBC likes to say, reset our relationship with the European Union. We've got this closer and closer integration and this drive for EU defence union and virtue signalling by heading off to EU4 headquarters and so on, but from David Lammy, and total silence from certain sections of the political class in this country.
It does, on the face of it, seem completely remarkable that can be the case in both respects. But remarkable that despite the fact we have left, apparently, the European Union, that we could be clamouring to climb back in, but also, as exactly like you say, that people should be quiet about it. But for especially now with what's going on in Ukraine and Russia, for that to be the sort of the dual effort for a push eastwards with NATO and a push absolutely everywhere with the EU, it's an awful lot for a lot of armed forces that don't really have much to say for themselves in terms of their firepower and capability at the moment, I'd say.
Absolutely. We'll be talking more about that in extra later on after the programme. Now, Sandi, let's come back to you then and let's move on to this issue of the People's Plan for Nature.
Yes, I mean, this is really on the back of, I was at a gathering in Devon a week or so ago, and a man handed me a paper that he'd been working on for quite a long time and asked me to read it. And I took it home, went through it, quite a large document. And he works in environmental impact, and his paper shed light on the fact that during 2018 and 2019, an extremist fringe mindset embodied by the likes of XR and the now defunct Just Stop Oil and Insulate Britain had formerly been rejected by the British public, had infiltrated many British charities up to the highest Director General level and CEO level, such as the National Trust and the RSPB and English Heritage. Charities like the National Trust and RSPB have a 5.8 million and 1.2 million, respectively, people that have signed up to what they do. These charities have adopted consultants and implemented draconian eco-extremist policies into their mission statements. Now, these charities no longer adhere to their original mission statements, but have become powerful political activist groups that push for extreme change in Britain under the guise of saving the planet and achieving net zero by 2030. By misusing or bypassing legitimate democratic process, such charities falsely claim to the mandate of their large membership bases through an NGO supported by David Attenborough called the People's Plan for Nature, or the PPFN, as it's known. This NGO played a significant part in pushing the CAN bill, which still hasn't gone away and will be up for review, unfortunately, in July. So I just want to look at the People's Plan for Nature. The People's Plan is a collective, collaborative initiative launched in 2023 by 3 leading UK conservation organisations, which is the WWF, as I mentioned earlier, the Royal Society for Protection of Birds, and the National Trust. The PPF does not have really any kind of head or CEO. Instead, it's jointly overseen by the leadership of 3 founding organisations, and that's Tanya Steele, the CEO of the WWF UK, Becky Spate, CEO of RSPB, and Hilary McGrady, Director General of the National Trust. These leaders have publicly endorsed the plan and are actively working to implement its recommendations within their respective organisations in a collaboration with other stakeholders. So let's look at this, looking at the WEF website. What transpires is that David Attenborough has inspired the UK to create the PPFN by David Attenborough's documentary series Wild Isles, which inspired a campaign called, the People's Plan for Nature, which includes 26 actions needed urgently to reverse the decline of natural world. Prior to this, in 2019, Prince William and David Attenborough called to protect the planet through a New Deal for Nature at Davos, which led to the making of a documentary, Our Wild Isles, in 2023. After these conservation charities came together, the RSPB and the National Trust, and for the first time, they created a follow-up documentary called Saving Our Wild Isles, narrated by the BBC. At the same time, the WEF Global Risk Report put environmental risk, biodiversity loss and ecosystem collapse as the 4th biggest risk in the next 10 years. So let's take a look at the closer look at the legitimacy of the People's Plan for Nature process, of the Citizens' Assembly's consultation to reach a consensus with just 103 people over a period of 4 weekends. So in 2023, the PPFN Citizens' Assembly was conducted as follows. It was about 277 people applied, 110 were selected, 107 finished the process, and 103 completed it. The age range was 16 plus, and all ticked all diversity groups, and all were financially supported with the expenses and childcare. The Assembly gave the PPFN its 26 recommendations and its legitimacy. So we were led to believe that these 103 people, including minors, were representative of the 70 million people of England, Scotland, Wales, and Northern Ireland, and capable of grasping the vast topic of climate change, impact on the environment, and net zero in 8 short days. In reality, these people were cherry-picked individuals steered by an expert facilitator from the engagement charity involved, using Delphi technique that led to a predetermined outcome. And that outcome was determined by the WEF, David Attenborough, the World Wildlife Fund, the National Trust, and the RSPB. The PPFN has published a 99-page report on the outcomes funded by the Esme Fairbairn Foundation. So this was clearly a misuse of charitable status for political aims. The PPFN has since funded other projects like the Cairngorms Connect, the Lundy Island Take No Zone, which actually is an area that has absolutely no human activity. It's a big experiment. The Duchy of Cornwall, the foreshore, and the riverbed rights. The Cornish foreshore is owned by the Crown. And could this be closed off to protect nature? It spawned New Citizens Project with their rapid democracy process, a consultancy platform that gets public consensus very quickly. And we've got John Alexander, who's from that. He says the People's Plan for Nature is a pioneering 2-phase project gathering responses in a national consultation to a UK-wide People's Assembly for Nature designed by the New Citizen Project based on a process called rapid democracy. So they've got these consultants that actually allow these people's assemblies to happen, and how they can process that information efficiently to push the agenda. So it's just been it begs the question, just how many ordinary British people who take out annual membership of the RSPB and the National Trust, even the Women's Institute has been targeted. Do they realise they've been signed up to a militant eco-zealotry organisation, and it's actually going towards their own enslavement? And instead of flower arranging, doing garden and bird surveys and visiting country houses on a rainy Sunday, it would appear that the unsuspecting British public is being misused by the charities who hide behind the large numbers of members taken out for the original old mission statement decades ago, and who claim a mandate for extremist environmental action for a reason that science simply doesn't back up. So, it looks as though these charities have really been used. Now, I've put this document in the show notes so that people can look at this, because it might help people, for instance, who are fighting campaigns with the Malvern Trust issue that's going on there, where perhaps they could lock off human activity on the Malvern Hills, and certainly with the WHS status that we're fighting here, where we're trying to bat off UNESCO from actually taking control of my town. So that's really a good deep dive into that, so people can use that as a resource, hopefully.
Thank you, Sandi. Thank you for that. Okay, Vanessa, let's come back to the Middle East then. And what's the latest on Gaza?
Yeah, well, I mean, the horrors haven't ceased in Gaza, of course, and even under the Trump administration, and they're about to get a whole lot worse. So in the last few days, it's been reported that there has been permission, or rather tactical approval, for a total invasion of Gaza. This was published in The Cradle. And interesting that Trump, on this situation, on Gaza in particular, he's given Netanyahu the green light. As Israel prepares to flatten Gaza, not a top priority, says Trump, except, of course, for the waterfront property contracts that he's hoping to secure for his son-in-law, Jared Kushner. So let's have a look at what Bezalel Smotrich has said again in the last 2 days to the Times of Israel. Within half a year, the Gaza population will be concentrated in a narrow strip of land between the border with Egypt and the Morag corridor, which Israel has recently established inside Gaza. Gaza will be totally destroyed and territory north of Morag will be empty. What does this actually mean? I just want to show two maps. The first showing previously. It's not entirely current, but it's certainly fairly recent, and it's in French, but I think people can work it out without direct translation. You can see there the Morag corridor to the south of Gaza. You can see the area in green of Rafah, which is still effectively perceived as Palestinian by the Zionists. Then Israeli control at the Philadelphia corridor and the border with Egypt. And then beyond the Morag corridor is the Khan Yunis band of territory. And if we look at the next map, we can see how devastating this is going to be for Palestinians. So the circle there goes from Khan Yunis to the north of Gaza, where you then enter the occupied territories of Palestine. So effectively what he's saying, not even the entirety of that southern section, only part of it sandwiched between Zionist forces, will be used to house 2 million Palestinians who were formerly living in a strip of land 40 kilometers by 12 kilometers, about the size of the Isle of Wight, are now going to be condensed into a tiny area, which is effectively, I don't even know how to describe it now. Smotrich went on to say the Gaza citizens will be concentrated in the south. They will be totally despairing, understanding there is no hope, and will be looking for relocation to begin a new life in other places. So effectively what the Zionists are saying, what they have done so far, the appalling atrocities that they've been committing on an hourly, daily basis against Palestinians was not enough. So now they're going to have to increase and double down on the pressure. And we'll come on to what else is going to be employed. But what's interesting, and we've talked about this before, that Israel is to use US military contractors, in other words, private military companies, in the new Gaza aid scheme. Now, what does this mean? There will be two private military contractors, basically UG Solutions. If we can just put the slide up on screen. UG Solutions, Anytime, Anywhere, and Safe Reach, which is the next slide. Now, the reason I haven't pulled out too much information on this is because there isn't any. What this reminds me of are the kind of intelligence or special forces cutout websites where you find absolutely no information about the teams. And in fact, the Safe Reach website page is only one page. So I've done here a summary of the Gaza plan based on the reports that I've seen. There isn't a sort of a comprehensive report on what's going to happen, but this gives a good idea. So in other words, the Zionists want to gain full control of the Gaza enclave, and they're claiming they want to eliminate Hamas. Of course, that hasn't gone particularly well for them so far. Zionist military occupation for an indefinite period of Gaza itself. Ethnic cleansing of 2 million Gazans. Of course, that is the final solution for the Zionists. Starvation as a strategy. So what they're intending to do is to reduce from 600 to 60 trucks per day, aid to be distributed only at 6 Zionist-controlled centers. The US private military contractors will be guarding those facilities and also helping to man checkpoints. And guess what? There will be facial recognition access to those aid distribution centers. So again, the crossover between what is happening in the West and what is happening on a far more elevated scale in Palestine becomes very apparent. And then finally, the EU involvement, particularly with France, Gaza evacuation scheme, Israel's Trojan horse for ethnic cleansing, ? This again is in the cradle. But effectively, France is focusing on the evacuation of alleged French citizens and their entire extended family, which of course could be a large number of Gazans. And we've been hearing about the evacuation of the injured and so on. So yeah, this does appear to be a stealth evacuation policy as part of the final solution, the final ethnic cleansing of Gaza, and of course the West Bank.
Thank you, Vanessa. Thank you for that. With lots to talk about in Extra today, but let's end, Charles, with WorldCoin.
We will. Just before we do, I'm just going to read a little bit of the statement that David Lammy has just put out about India and Pakistan, because it bears great relation to what Vanessa's just been talking about and I would say, the sort of double standards that he and the UK government applies. He talks about the government urging India and Pakistan to show restraint and to engage in direct dialogue to find a swift diplomatic path forward, and that he's made clear to his counterparts that if this escalates further, nobody wins. So that's his position on India and Pakistan. Where is he when Israel and Gaza is concerned, would be my question, just to finish that off. But yes, we now go to technology, of course, always related in some sense to Israel. But in this instance, really one of the great tech cons in which we're supposed to surrender to the belief that machines will control humans. And this rumbles on. This time we take a look at Tools for Humanity, the organization which has just launched its latest scam in the United States. On screen in a second will be the promotional video designed to encourage people to hand over their biometric data by dealing with this little white ball. And as you see, it attracts a very cheery and diverse folk. Now, one of the brains behind this is apparently Sam Altman, who is also credited with creating the OpenAI platform ChatGPT, which is directly relevant to the scheme being run here. The premise being that in a world of generative AI, it is not possible to tell what is human and what is not, which is where Tools for Humanity comes in. At this point, I should say that if this makes no sense to you, then firstly, you're not the only one. And secondly, you should most certainly listen to the first of the German Warfare podcasts from Monday night about exactly this topic, and there'll be a link in the show notes. But as reported by Reuters a couple of years ago, and similar to the way in which people were convinced to take injections by being offered hamburgers, the incentive here is that if you submit your biometric data, you may be credited with WorldCoin, a type of cryptocurrency which may, at some point, be worth something. So there are a lot of conditionals here, but that's not deterred the gullible from squaring up to these machines. This is what they look like, and the Tools for Humanity cast it as their signature gizmo, describing it as being a custom, state-of-the-art hardware device built for the WorldCoin project to verify humanness and uniqueness in a secure and privacy-preserving way. Now, if that sounds like an immensely unlikely promise, then I wonder if a clip from their launch will reassure you.
Okay, let's give it a spin.
Nothing like a live demo here. So he just scanned his QR code from his World app. That'll connect the orb with his device, and that starts the process. All right, so he's a little bit too far from the orb. It asks him to move a little bit closer. Try one more time. The stage lights might be affecting the cameras we were afraid of, but it'll work. Perfect. Bear with us here. Nothing like a live demo.
Live demos.
All
Let's
right,
go.
here we go.
Okay.
All right. Scan his QR code, so he's paired the orb with his phone. All right, so it's asking him to move a little bit closer because he's standing too far away. And you don't have to be in the exact position, but just approximately right. So now it knows he's in the right position. But it sees something. Yeah. So the orb detected something was covering his face, and he forgot to remove his glasses. So he just took those off. And now the orb can clearly see his face and his eyes, and should just take a few seconds to finish its process. There we go. Simple as that.
Wow.
Indeed, simple as that. And how very apt that the title for the event was At Last. Anyway, from the incessant applause, it seems that the audience were also unable to think of a more simple method for determining whether or not a human is human. So a pointless exercise for the user, perhaps, but it does gift to World, as it's now called, and to Tools for Humanity, an extraordinary amount of information. And this is information which can absolutely be used against the very same user. Now, as pointed out on very many occasions by UK Column, not only does this technology not do what it purports to do, it's also not secure. And it is, of course, security which is used as one of the prime lures. So we'll just look at a slide now from TechCrunch a couple of years ago, reporting on the password theft of the so-called orb operators. Interestingly, the article goes on to describe the basis of the pyramid scheme itself, saying that those interested must first visit an orb operator who are recruited and contracted by WorldCoin and earn money for every person they sign up. Now, whilst Americans may begin queuing up in their droves, there is now a groundswell of pushback elsewhere in the world, something which was not mentioned at last week's launch event. And here we see reporting from Kenya with news of a recent High Court decision against WorldCoin. Now, I've mentioned this case previously, which was brought by the Katiba Institute, supported by the International Commission of Jurists, and the ICJ put out a statement which says ICJ Kenya welcomes today's landmark judgment declaring the collection, processing and transfer of biometric data by WorldCoin as unlawful and unconstitutional. Now, they went on to order the following, which was, my apologies, I've gone on too far. They ordered WorldCoin to there's a prohibition on data collection, the permanent deletion of data, and a revocation of data processing certificate. So, in effect, they have shut down Tools for Humanity in the country, which should just go to show that pushback is always worth it. And I think the only thing to add is that Amnesty also put out a statement, in effect, supporting this decision, but also saying that in the pipeline there's action to be taken against Meta for its abuse of Facebook in the sense that they put out inflammatory content with regard to tensions in Ethiopia, which they say has pushed people towards violence that they might not otherwise have met. So, as I say, this is a step absolutely in the right direction against the technology that not only doesn't actually work, but that really has no place in our lives.
And maybe something we'll discuss in extra is why it seems to be only the global south that's pushing back against this stuff.
Absolutely.
But anyway, we're going to leave it there for today. Thank you, Charles. Thank you to Vanessa and Sandi for joining us, and for you for watching. Join us in a couple of minutes for extra if you're a UK Column member. If you're not a UK Column member, then please consider joining, because we do need your ongoing support. So see you in a few minutes in extra. Otherwise, enjoy the germ warfare tonight, interview tomorrow, and we'll be back on Friday with more news. See you then. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.